we will be talking about decoding digital capitalization to boost local talent. And we have Pelonomi Moiloa, the founder of Lelapa AI, one of the top 100 most influential people according to the Time magazine, and she will be interviewed by Yolanda, who has been working on television for many years, who created a digital communication company called Mejor Dicho. You have the floor and the couch. Good morning. So I have to open the first can of worms, as Yolanda said. And if you want to listen to the Spanish interpretation, please go get some headphones. They are outside. So my name is Susana Roza Vigil. And my name has been subjected to many different pronunciations around the world. And every time I heard my family names and my name pronounced differently, I thought that it was losing my identity. And Pelonomi is trying to help us get identified with what we are. So we are opening more cans of worms. Well, we want to open the stage to you, so I will be conducting the interview. And please, if you want to make questions, don't hesitate, because we will give you a mic. And now we'll switch to English.
Good. I'm so glad we are together. There's this expression in Spanish that says, open the melon. That means that we're going to open up a subject which is like profound and deep. And just to introduce you, I'm going to get this concept. It's an African concept that, let me see my notes, Ubuntu means I am because you are. It's the concept of family. I'm not if you are not, so that's the group. And that's the concept Pelonomi has created as the idea of her project. And before I start my questioning, I want you, please, to explain to us, what is your concept about? Tell us.
Yeah, so I am in the space of computers and technology. Growing up, I didn't believe that computers and technology was made for people like me. I didn't see us in the movies, in the sci-fi films. But later on, I went to study electrical engineering. And part of what I realized was that the reason why technology did not feel like it was made for me is because it wasn't. And a lot of the technology that has been made that exists in the world wasn't actually made for us. It was inspired by motivations of developing weapons of war, or in order to separate people, or to make a lot of money for big companies. And the whole concept of using Ubuntu as a foundation for building our technology means that we are building technology that is made for us, to make the world a nicer place for more people, rather than dividing people.
Fantastic. Let me go back to names, because your company name is Lelapa Artificial Intelligence. Your project is called Bula Bula. Explain a little bit more about the meaning of it, and what do you do?
Yeah, so I think maybe in some places in the world, names don't have a lot of meaning. But in South Africa and on the African continent, names often are a wish or almost a spell bestowed upon something that thing then needs to embody. So for example, Lelapa means home, family, community. which is not automatically a concept that you consider when you think about AI. AI automatically instills fear in people, it instills separation, progression into a future that is a bit more isolated, and we wanted to turn that around and say, no, technology should be something that brings us together and helps us to be more human. And then Vula Vula is a name derived from one of South Africa's 12 official languages. We have 12 of them. And it means speak. Because we believe that technology should be able to speak the language of its users, and that people should not have to switch a language or try to be somebody or something else in order to be able to use technical tools. So Vula Vula is speak. And coincidentally, in another language in South Africa, I mean, close in family, but not the same language, Vula Vula would mean open, open, which is also quite nice.
Okay, it's very nice.
But that is a coincidence. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Nothing happens by accident. So, I've talked to the audience just to check if they have any questions for us, so they are free to interrupt us.
Cool.
De nuevo, yo os animo a que si queréis hacer una...
So I encourage you to make questions, and for that you just need to raise your hands. Tú miras a un lado del público, yo miro al otro, a ver si hay alguien que quiera hablar. Hecho. Bien.
About a project that, in theory, I've found this definition. Founder of Lelapa Artificial Intelligence, a South African startup known by that project, Vula Vula, a very innovative solution of artificial intelligence based in natural language processing for underrepresented languages in Africa to facilitate business communication.
Yeah.
Is that it? And if so, what are the technical challenges you had to face?
That's a very good description.
Thank you.
Can I take that later? So yeah, I think, I mean, I'm not fully aware what the experience is like in Spain, but I know that there are many languages in Spain. It's not just Spanish, for example. But if you don't speak Spanish as your main language, or your mother or your grandmother, and they want to speak to Siri, does Siri understand them? In South Africa, Siri certainly doesn't understand our languages, and it's not just Siri, it's these very small everyday inconveniences for many of us. It not being able to recognize your name, it, when you type on WhatsApp, it auto-correcting to English when you're trying to type in another language. But for a large population of the African continent, it's not just an everyday convenience, it's a barrier to entry to participate in the digital economy. Because now it means you can't use a banking app to send yourself money, to withdraw money, to check your balance. It means that you can't call into a call center to complain about a service because the call center technology cannot process your voice and your language. You cannot make purchases online around essential products and services like electricity or things like that. You can't get medical services over online or anything like that. And on the African continent, it's really important that these are accessible through things like mobile connection, because that is most of how the African continent connects to the internet, through mobile applications. And due to the lack of infrastructure development, for many people, it's the only way they can get access to those services, because traveling a long distance is too costly and you would have to go too far. And then when you arrive, there's like, sorry, we're closed, come back tomorrow, but you've spent your last little bit of money to get there. So really the opportunity that opens for small businesses to be able to proliferate their products and services in digital channels becomes exponentially more exciting when you're able to do it in the local language of the people who need to consume it.
Talking about local languages, you said 12 languages in South Africa. We don't have so many, but I am from the north of Spain, a region called Asturias, and we speak a different language, like a dialect. Here in Malaga, they speak with a different accent, but it's the same language. But let me check with them. ¿Quién habla, además del español?
Who speaks another language aside from Spanish. Catalan, for example, yes, these people speak a different language, so they...
Than Spanish, so we have some...
Yeah.
Yo solo os estoy animando a que preguntéis, ¿eh? Yo intento aquí dar...
I'm just encouraging you to make questions.
Melon, let's open another melon about ethics.
Yes.
If we talk about languages, in terms of data privacy and cultural sensitivity, how do
Yeah.
you manage that?
Oh, that's true. You actually asked me what were the challenges, and so I'll bring that into the
Okay,
answer
good.
of this question because I just ignored that question and talked about something else. So yes, some of the challenges we face are with ethics and privacy, but I wouldn't say that's the main challenge. For African languages, there is very little textual evidence of the language. That is because on the African continent, we have had a very oral history, an oral tradition where stories and information and knowledge gets passed down from person to person through voice and memory, not through writing. So this means that there isn't a lot of writing to teach to a machine to say, this is the language, this is how it works, this is what it looks like. Whereas for other languages, especially from the West, there is a lot of textual evidence. The entire internet is filled with all of this textual evidence to teach to a machine. But now, if we are in the African context and wanting to teach things to machines, if we want to use the technology from the West, it means everything needs to be converted to text first in order for us to do so, because that's how they did it. And we can't do that. So the main challenge is around data, getting access to data. There's a Wikipedia page that summarizes the languages of the internet, and it summarizes it into like 34 or 38 languages. There are over 7,000 languages in the world, and it says that the internet only consists of less than 30 of them. And you may have guessed, may have not, but none of those are African languages. So when we're thinking about the amount of data or the amount of information available for a language, Africa is severely limited, and we have to be very creative and clever about how we use that data to train our models. And yeah, I think the other challenges outside of that are with computation. You need really powerful computers in order to train these machines, and there is a severe shortage of those powerful machines, and you need lots of electricity to power those machines. I'm from South Africa. We're currently going through a period of power cuts. I talk about it as like sharing electricity, like you have a turn and then I have a turn, but it means when you're having a turn, I don't have electricity. But you can't train a huge machine if you don't have a steady electricity flow. So those are some of the more direct challenges of creating the machines. But yeah, ethical challenges is one of them. Cultural representation is another. So like you were saying, people in Spain have different accents, for example. We have to train models in English, which is maybe a bit surprising because there is English in African language, but in multiple accents. Because even if we do then want to use English accents, then it should be able to cater to a range of different accents, for example. And then culturally sensitive, if you move into the more ChatGPT LLM space, there are just some concepts that are not covered because that machine hasn't been trained in the context of our experience. But also then that it just gets completely wrong because it just doesn't have the words. So some things that are offensive in one context might not be offensive in another. And getting a machine to understand those cultural nuances is quite difficult. And then when the machine doesn't know the language very well, that in itself can be a bit offensive. So we did a test with not this current ChatGPT version, but a previous one. And we asked it to count in a South African language called isiZulu. I don't know how many of you can count in English. I'm hoping a number of you can, and so you'll recognize the pattern. But it said that to count in isiZulu, you just say gu 1, gu 2, gu 3, gu 4, Q5, Q6, Q7, Q8, Q9, Q10. That's not how you count in isiZulu, but because of its hallucination, it just determined that that's how it was going to count in isiZulu, and those kinds of things happen all the time.
When you said that you have to check that languages are basically oral, how do you engage with the community? How do you engage with the linguistic experts in order to develop your project?
So because we don't have a lot of data, we create or collect very little, and then we make sure it's very, very high quality. So whereas English speakers might be able to go to Twitter or Facebook or wherever else to collect information from the public, I mean, there's some people whose recordings of language you don't really want to have in your model. Maybe they're using profane language or proliferating ideas that you don't want to proliferate in a model. If you're just collecting from the entire internet, it's very difficult to weed that out and make sure that you have the key pieces of information. So we create data sets, we curate them, and we do that with local communities who speak the language through different partners. We then also use linguists to help make sure that the data that we created can really intend the purpose of what we want to do. And then we use linguist communities in what we call a linguist in the loop kind of feedback cycle. So you take the model and you kind of record everything that it's doing wrong in the language, basically. And some of these are things that I wouldn't even know because only a linguist would be able to identify it. But they then correct that, and then we can put it back into the cycle. So instead of using lots of data, we can use very little with a lot of human expertise in order for it to learn a bit better. And then we also just narrow the domain of focus of a model. So instead of it having to know about the whole universe, it can just know about insurance. And then we just make sure it focuses on insurance, get people within that community to help refine it in that place. And we're just able to make models with so much less. Yeah.
Thinking about the future, how do you envision Bula Bula transforming sectors such as health or education in South Africa?
Yeah, I mean, the education space is a really interesting one. There are studies that show that if you are learning things like mathematics or science in a language that isn't your mother tongue, then you learn a lot slower and a lot less in depth the material. And then this often means that people are having to learn a language before they then learn maths and science or these really complex ideas. I mean, I studied in Japan and had to do a number of my courses in Japanese, and I didn't really know Japanese, so I don't understand anything. I didn't remember anything. I didn't learn anything. And this is the everyday experience of many people across the world, not just in Africa and in the global south, where they have to learn a language and then learn all these complex concepts. And having these technological tools means that we skip that step so that they can just learn what they need to learn in order to know how to do something or understand something. And in the health space, for example, we're working with a use case now where there are mobile clinics all over South Africa. It's like in a little container, like a shipping container. But there are, of course, fewer mobile clinics than there are people who need a clinic. And so through just a chat system, you're able to triage or understand how severe somebody's case is in terms of needing to see a clinic, and then automatically assign them to clinics that are closest to them, make sure that there's a slot to book them, and when they arrive, the person who's tending to them already has an idea of what is going on. And those kinds of medical interventions means that medical treatment is a lot closer to access, a lot more streamlined, which means those people can see so many more people. So through AI, you are increasing the capacity to solve a problem, but reducing the cost, and I think that's quite amazing.
Your project is based, obviously, in South Africa. Have you thought about expanding the project? And if so, in which parts of the world have you thought about Bula Bula?
So I'm trying not to get too far ahead of myself. We have definitely have on our roadmap to expand to West and East Africa. So just by the 4 main languages we focus on in South Africa, adding 2 languages from Nigeria, Hausa and Yoruba, and 1 language from East Africa, Swahili, we're able to reach and make services more easy to access for 350 million people. That's more than the population of the US with just 7 languages. And so we're looking to expand into those regions as well. But I think in future, it would be really quite interesting to go into places like South America and help communities there do what we do. We wouldn't want to go there and just be like, okay, we have a solution for you. But to partner with organizations there to help them enable themselves to do what we're doing, because I think they have some of the challenges. Yeah.
Yes, we have a question. Yolanda, please.
Hola, hola.
Hello. I think it's fascinating.
En Spanish.
Pero lo puedes hacer en español.
Go ahead. You can speak in Spanish and she'll get interpretation.
No, we have time. Unless Jorge nos dice algo, tenemos tiempo.
Unless Jorge tells us that we are running out of time, we're doing fine. Speaking of different languages, right? Someone else raised their hands. English?
Buscamos la traducción y así aprovechamos el...
Well, we solve the interpretation problem. We can take this question in English and then we give the floor to Yolanda.
It's open.
Yeah, thank you very much for what you're doing. I think it's particularly important. I have a lot of questions, but I'll only ask 2. You mentioned the pipeline and getting the material for training the model. I was wondering, the first question is, what is the ideal relationship with the local media to make your work easier? Because there is, of course, not all the languages are written down, but I think that every place has its local media. What would be the best way of, what can media do to help you? And the second question is, it feels like every technology has its formative stage before it gets shaped and before it, cements itself, and we end up in the, basically in the status quo that prolongs itself. So it feels like with AI, we are in this very narrow window of opportunity. The question is, would you agree with this? And if yes, how many years do we have to bring all those languages on board before it gets too late? 3 years, 5 years, or we don't need to hurry? Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think that first question is quite excellent. Actually, one of my co-founders is trying to sue a local media house in South Africa to get access to their information. And I think that points really directly to the opportunities of media's involvement in helping organizations like ours get access to local language data, because that is the work that they've been doing for years and years and years, connecting with local communities, listening to local communities, with those local languages. And for organizations like ours, media houses are some of the only places that have a historical record of this language in its everyday use in everyday subjects. And we are quite vigorously trying to pursue partnerships with those media houses. And I think there's also an opportunity here for dual benefit, right? Because media houses will need to reduce costs around things like subtitling or dubbing, or making sure that their content is accessible to people who can't hear or can't read, can't see. And there can be a collaboration there if we have the data available. And at Lelapa, we're also quite interested in understanding how to make sure that data is just not an extractive process where you take it and then you go and you make your money somewhere else. what does it look like if we put royalties on data in the same way you put royalties on songs, and every time it's used, that money is able to go back into the place from where the data came. And I think for the media industry, this would be a really great revenue potential, especially considering the decline of typical media, like print media and things like that. There could be a relationship there.
Good.
Yeah.
And the second question is about timing. When is not too late? What a difficult question, by the way.
That is a difficult question.
That's a big melon.
There's a stat, like something like 4 to 7 languages die every year. And that is the stat that makes me feel like this issue is a bit more urgent than we think it is. There's the other school of thought that then just says, okay, fine, just converge on a handful of languages, we can all speak English and the problem will be solved. But I don't think we are fully aware of what the implications are when people lose their heritage, their language, their culture, and their sense of belonging to society, and the type of societal obligation that instills in people. And when we lose that, what happens? So for me, it's quite urgent, but I haven't thought about the year thing. I'll have to think about that a bit more.
We have a couple of days for you to think. Yolanda, please.
Thanks so much, Pelonomi. I'm loving this interview. I would like to know, well, based on all your expertise, your knowledge, you were saying that you studied in Japan, you could have been working in any company and you could have had a very simple and easy life. So when did you complicate your life so much? When did you decide to do this? Is there any anecdote? Is there any milestone, any moment, any eureka moment? When did you decide to change the world? When did you decide, I want to make it? And when did you decide to go to other countries and do the same thing?
And actually, I asked myself that almost every day. Like, why didn't I just find a rich husband and live an easier life? But I think I used to work at a bank. And in the bank, I was working as a data scientist there. And there was a moment where internally, they wanted an adverse media screening tool. So this tool would go across the internet, go across websites and media sites, and scrape information from them to determine whether people who were mentioned in crime reports were people who were associated with the bank, so that we could do some risk prevention, hand it over to a person and investigate. This person has been associated with this fraud scam. We should probably separate from them. And part of the internal team, I mean, we were a data science team, so we made the tool for them. We said, here you are. And they said, no, thank you. We're just going to buy it from somebody else. And at that point, it made it very clear to me that there are some places that are part of the economics machine to make things go, to make things run. But those aren't necessarily the places that change the world the way that we know it. And I definitely wanted to be in a space where people didn't tell me things were impossible when I knew that they were. And I wanted to make a genuine change on the environment around me and make the lives of people in Africa a little bit nicer and a little bit easier. And I knew it was possible. And if they weren't going to help me, then I was going to go find some other people who have, and found a lovely team of 20 people, and that's what we're trying to do.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
We still have 10 minutes to go, but okay, we still have 5 minutes to go. We have a question there, but in the meantime, since we're talking in English for a mainly Spanish audience, I want to give a round of applause for the team of translators. They're going to be working for us, just for us to share ideas. So thank you very much. Thank you. Question there, please.
Hi, welcome to Malaga. I'm Isabel Benedí, and I strongly believe that the richness of the world is diversity too. And as we said, we are losing a lot of this cultural diversity we have because a lot of languages are disappearing. And also in terms of people with functional diversity too, it's very difficult to access to many content or even services, which is not very good. My question is, until now, have you had any interest from public administration or countries for your technology or your app there? I consider that is very necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody, at least in our context, is quite excited about the opportunity to offer services in local languages. And on the public administration front, this is things like just being able to communicate legal documents and processes, to help people assist in collecting their grant funding for unemployment benefits and things like that. There are a number of administrative processes that public servants need to go through, and they are very much hindered by not being able to automate some of those processes because they need people to be able to speak the language. So there has been interest, but it is also difficult because in the development phase of a country, there's just so much to worry about all at once. And so I do think that our governments are focused more on other kinds of developmental problems like healthcare, like access to water and electricity and things like that. So there is a bit of a limited attention to be like futuristic AI. How can we support that? Because there isn't automatically a link to see how it can assist in achieving those other development goals.
I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, the last question about suggestions. What kind of advice would you give to any innovator thinking about working with artificial intelligence? What have you learned that you would like to share?
Ooh, that is a tough question.
Huh?
I think for us, what has been quite beautiful is that the end point of arriving in a world where what we have built has made the world a better place makes it so much easier to go through the day-to-day struggles and challenges. Because we know that what is the end is so much more beautiful and so much more inspiring than any challenge that could come our way now. Sometimes I say to people in the team, they'll be like, I'm so afraid. And I'm like, that's cool. Put it on the shelf. We have things to do because we're going there and we need to get there. And I think that would be something that I would want young innovators to remember, is that we're here to make the world a nice place for people. And there's nothing more important than that.
Fantastic. If you read about Pelonomi's project, her project mission is based in 3 pillars: wisdom, family, and home, which is very peculiar in the artificial intelligence world. So I want to finish thinking about this. Empodera is a family of experts, of friends, of Cibervoluntarios, of people of Malaga. So I want to finish, just welcome you to our Ubuntu. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
It's been a pleasure.